Craig and Karen supporting local bookstores, audiobooks, and more. Join the world of stories. As always, thank you for listening.
Hi, and welcome to the Libro.fm podcast, where we talk to authors, narrators, booksellers, and more. I'm Craig.
And I'm Karen. On today's episode, you're going to hear an awesome interview with author Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, the author most recently of Catalina, which was longlisted for this year's National Book Award. And you may also know her from her book, The Undocumented Americans, which was also a finalist for the National Book Award when it came out.
Just killing it, Karla.
So talented.
Yes. I just got back from the Texas Book Festival, where I got to moderate a panel with Karla and Amanda Montell, which was extremely nerve-wracking, but ended up being fine. So I think Karla might be the only author so far that's going to be on the podcast twice.
Oh my gosh, I love it. We should have her co-host. Maybe she wants to permanently join.
Yes, I'm sure she has nothing going on. Would you like to be the third co-host? No, she can just have my place.
Nope, you're stuck. Well, with that, Craig, will you play us a clip from the book before we head into our interview?
Yes, I would love to. I will play a clip from Catalina, which Karla narrates herself, so you are in for a treat. Stay tuned at the end of the interview to hear what Karen and I are currently listening to.
In the summer of 2010, the year Instagram launched, there was a cricket invasion in Queens. Something to do with global warming, and if you believed my grandfather, yet another sign that America was lagging behind Cuba in scientific advances. He was not a communist, he just had a bit of a thing for Fidel. Dozens of crickets were under the floors and in the walls of our apartment. The landlord sent an exterminator, but it had little effect on their fornication. The sound was intolerably loud. My grandfather said that back in Ecuador, summer nights in Esmeraldas were so loud, it sounded like, well, what it was, a beach and a jungle. I had not been to Esmeraldas, where he spent every summer as a child. Like him, I was undocumented, so I could not go to Esmeraldas, probably ever. I would probably never see the Amazon, and thus I would never really know a summer night. He would always have that over me. He knew in his flesh what I could only read about.
All right. Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, the author of The Undocumented Americans and most recently the best-selling novel Catalina. Welcome to the podcast, Karla.
Thank you so much for having me.
We would love to get started if you could introduce yourself to our listeners and talk a little bit about what you're up to.
Oh my God. Well, my name is Karla, and this is my first time in Colorado. This is the highest altitude that I've been since I was in Ecuador. I was born in Ecuador, which is in a sort of mountainous region, which is 9,000 feet above sea level. And I hear that Denver is 5,000 feet. It's a nice homecoming up in these clouds.
You know what they say about Colorado? It's the Ecuador of America.
No, well, let's start saying that.
We're going to make that a thing.
You heard it here first, folks. We just had the pleasure of speaking with Alia Bilal, and I understand that the two of you are going to be in conversation at Margins, I think later this week. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, is it today? Sorry.
No.
It was today. Oh, perfect. You're going to be in conversation today. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you'll be speaking about and what you're looking forward to.
I'm not sure what we'll be speaking about. We will be asked questions about our books, and I think that we're going to be talking about just the journey in creating these very different books, but that I think that have at their core ideas about identity and belonging and what it means to be a person who both fits into the culture and also feels a little bit to be outsiders. And I think that we both relate to that as well as people. And so I don't know, I'm interested in hearing what she has to say about how she managed to create her book.
Speaking of books, 2024, it's been a massive year for you. Catalina was released just a couple of months ago and is already a bestseller, so congratulations. And then the announcement came out that it was longlisted for the National Book Award, so huge congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you walk us through your year? We're dying to hear what led up to the lead up to the release was like and how the past couple months have been for you.
Oh my God, it is October. So my book came out in July and I had a book tour over the summer. I went to, I think, like 11 different cities. It was my first time really going around the United States outside of like the Eastern, the sort of like the Northeast. And it was great. It was my first time meeting my readers. My first book came out in March 2020, so right at the start of lockdown. And so I've been writing and doing events for the past 4 years, but not in person really. So it was my first time seeing my readers, and it was really sweet. I have a lot of young readers. I have a lot of like high school aged, college aged. I have a lot of readers who don't normally consider themselves big readers, and that makes me really excited because I remember being, little and getting a book from the library and then going home and just excitedly devouring it. And the idea that in 2024, with all of these distractions, all of these exciting apps and everything, the idea that like young people are reading novels is amazing. And I think that they're all amazing nerds, and I'm really happy that they come to a book event. So that was surprising, and it was really sweet, and I had I had a good time.
What was it like to find out that Catalina had been longlisted for the National Book Awards?
It was exciting. It was exciting. I mean, the truth is that it sort of lulled me into like a minor depression. I think that's how these things happen. I mean, one thing is that my first book, had such an unpredictable journey. When I wrote it, I didn't know that anybody was going to read it, and that allowed me a lot of liberty and a lot of freedom writing it. And it sort of was published under an unlucky star and COVID and all of that, but it had its own journey. But the book was almost shelved by the original publishers. They didn't really like it. And when the book, once it did have its journey and it was celebrated, I think it taught me a little bit about how unpredictable publishing can be and how unpredictable feedback can be. And so I'm trying to sort of keep my head down and focus on my writing, because if I pay a little too much attention to outside forces like that, I imagine I'm just going to be led astray. It's so unpredictable.
If I can ask you one more question about the book tour that you mentioned, I really enjoyed watching the online videos that came out, and I saw you in conversation with like Gia Tolentino. I know you talked to Liberty Hardy and Jesus Rodriguez, and I just can't imagine what that experience was like, given that, you weren't able to do this with your first book because of COVID and all of the things in the world. Do you think that, knowing now that this is what your readership is like, and the just seeing the joy that people have for your words, will that have any impact on what you decide to do next?
I think that it will. I still think that the most important thing is sort of for me to feel good about what I write and for me to like what I write. And I tell that to young people who ask me advice about writing or about their art, is to just make sure that they're proud of what they're doing and that they like what they're doing. And that's going to take them places. I also know that so many of my readers are children of immigrants or like grandchildren of immigrants, or in general, people who feel a little bit like outsiders. Maybe they're neurodivergent, maybe they like grew up in foster care, and they feel a connection to my writing. And that makes me really happy. I also see how sort of deeply xenophobic the moment is right now, as it tends to be around presidential elections. And so I hope that people find comfort in my writing, and that is something that I'm going to make sure that my writing continues to provide for people.
You mentioned in an Instagram post where you posted about the audiobook for Catalina, that it's a book that really needs to be heard to fully get. Um, how did recording the audiobook change how you see the story, and what do you think comes across differently in the audio as opposed to the print copy?
I think you can tell that it's a character when I'm reading it. You can tell. I think the little bit of a separation between the author and the character. I intentionally made it a little bit confusing. We have very similar kind of autobiographical backstories. We both went to Harvard, grew up undocumented, grew up in New York, and I wanted there to be just enough of those similarities that I could play
Mm.
um, with what the first person means and with autofiction and all of that. Um, but hearing myself read it, I was delighted by Catalina. I was frustrated by Catalina. Sometimes I'd read a line that she said and I would be like, oh my God, why, why would you say that? It really allowed me to experience the book a little bit like I was at a PTA conference or like at a student teacher conference, and I was here sort of to speak with Catalina, and I was just like, she did what? Um,
I
it
found
was
myself
very
thinking
much.
that sometimes too, like especially like her inner monologue. Sometimes I'm like, oh damn, like.
I had a lot of oh damn moments myself, and I was like, why? Why?
I loved that Instagram post as well that Craig mentioned because it seemed like you had a really great team around you. Was it PRH Audio? It seemed like it was a like fun, kind of joyful experience. What is that like? I haven't ever been in the the room for an audiobook recording.
So I did the audio for my first book, The Undocumented Americans, and again, it was very early on in 2020. I think I had COVID, but there was no testing. There was no. It wasn't really a thing at the time, and so I think you can hear it in my voice. Catalina was such a fun experience because I really wanted to lean into the girlishness of her voice, and I also wanted I worked with a really amazing director, and I wanted to use my voice, which tends to, it is girlish. It tends to go into vocal fry. It tends to go into upspeak, and I really wanted to use that because some of the sentences I write, some of the things Catalina says, are I would imagine them in like Werner Herzog's voice in my head, and I was like, this is dark. This is like uh, layered in so many different levels of irony or whatever. But when I said it in my voice, I feel like I could get away with it. I feel like I could get away with so much if you sort of see it in a girlish voice. And that usually, my experience of life is like you would be not taken so seriously, or you would be sort of dismissed if you speak the way that I do. But I wanted to really press really hard on that and kind of dare people to dismiss Catalina. And, I just sort of waited to see, just sat back and waited to see how they would react to her.
That is thank you so much for sharing that. That's super interesting. Well, I think I know you have a lot to do today, so we're going to move into some sillier questions for you. We like to do something we call lightning round, where we just ask you some rapid fire questions about all kinds of things. And I think Craig has the first one for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I liked in Catalina how she mentions like you shouldn't be impressed by Memorial Hall at Harvard because it will like out you as like a newbie or whatever. And I was curious in the time that you spent here in Boston and Cambridge, what did you find anything that impressed you that we should know about?
Let's see. Again, this is an interesting question for me because I think that I have like a mechanism in my head where the minute that I'm going to be like impressed or intimidated by something, there's just like a Venus flytrap sort of mechanism where it just catches it. And then
Mm.
and then I don't and I don't feel anything. I think it's because I had a very traumatic childhood. So but I don't know. There was a lot of wealth. There was a lot of wealth at Harvard. And I think that I had a different understanding of wealth that was more of like I was on the L train, on the subway, and I would see that people had like expensive rain boots or something. But it was a different kind of wealth that was like railroad industry wealth, like telecommunications industry wealth. That was definitely, I had like very big eyes and was just like, whoa, I think that I'm still very much like a working class girl who, whenever I enter a museum, I'm just like, oh my God, the Sackler family. I guess that was really impressive. There's there's a building named after the Sacklers. Again, seeing names like that, seeing it, all of that was just extremely, extremely impressive. That it was famous. It was just all sorts of famous. I didn't have an experience though of like JD Vance at Yale of like, is this how the silverware works? Because I watched The Little Mermaid. I watched Gilmore Girls. I understood. Rich people are not that different from you or me. But still, it's amazing to be like, this is where, JF Kennedy was, JF Kennedy? John F. Kennedy was an undergrad.
Like JD Vance.
Well, he did go by, when he was at Harvard, the little known fact, he did go by JF Kennedy.
Really?
Yeah.
What, are you making this up?
Yes, I also like spreading information.
You're very believable. I was like, seriously?
Yes, I like spreading misinformation, just keeping it a little bit spicy.
There's the quote of the podcast. I like spreading misinformation.
Well, there's the Peabody thing where it's like, I think if I'm going to get this wrong, but I think the Peabody in Connecticut is pronounced Peabody, and the Peabody in Massachusetts and Cambridge is pronounced Peabody.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that you get when you listen to my audiobook. You get the different pronunciations, you
literally say Peabody in your book. Like,
Exactly.
Doesn't she work at a building that's like the Peabody, and then she kind of gives some kind of like background about it?
Peabody. But if I was going to the Dinosaur Museum in New Haven, I would be going to the Peabody.
Interesting. I'm learning all kinds of things today.
See, this is why the audiobook is so great. Another thing is that I think you really get to find that you get to hear the sentences land the way that I intended. And this is something that happens in real life with me, which is sometimes people don't know if I'm joking or if I'm telling the truth. And the truth is that I'm not so sure. I think that I take myself both too seriously and not seriously enough. And that's the line that I straddle. But in the book, in the audiobook, you get to hear the lines land the way that I intended. And sometimes I think it is surprising. You're like, oh, that was a serious line. I thought that was a throwaway. And then some lines you're like, oh, that was a joke. That was a joke. But you can hear it in my voice. I think.
Amazing.
I feel bad about my lightning round question now. That was like such a
I know
intellectual, deep question. My question is, what's the best thing you've eaten recently?
Oh my God. Okay, last night I went to downtown Denver and I had some pho and it was fantastic. And now I'm going to have some Salvadoran food that's also local. I'll let you know how that is.
Yes.
We'll expect an email with your review.
Please do. Whenever I'm like sad or stressed or nervous, I seek out immigrant food. I seek out food made by immigrants. I feel the love. I feel sort of taken care of. Again, I had a very difficult childhood. And so sometimes I'll just like get some Puerto Rican food. And I'm like, I know a Puerto Rican lady made this and she's someone's auntie. And that makes me feel taken care of. So today I do have an event. But to prepare, I ordered some Salvadoran food just to feel like a kid again.
Look, you thought your question was going to be silly, and then you got a deep answer too.
It was beautiful.
Do you listen to music when you write? And if so, what do you listen to?
I do listen to music when I write. I listen to a lot of music to hype myself up because, as you can imagine, Catalina is a very confident character, and it took hours to sort of get into the headspace to be able to write from her voice. Again, especially the political moment is so difficult as an immigrant, I can only speak for myself, but to hear a lot of the discourse and the propaganda, really, you feel really bad. You feel really low on yourself. You feel really vulnerable and scared. And so, in order to be able to inhabit the voice of this young woman who's so confident and has so much bluster, it's a process. And so it does. I mean, it takes a lot of hip hop. I listened to a lot of, there's this Nicki Minaj song called Barbie Dreams, where she goes through a list of all of the rappers that she would not sleep with. And she just insults them. She just goes through a list and just insults them, but creates this wonderful sort of masterpiece where if you are a rapper that she did not include in the song, even if she didn't insult you, like that is, you're wondering why wasn't I included? I wanted
it's almost more insulting.
Yes, I wanted to create a similar, and she does something with her voice there in that song where she has some terrific insults, but then she does, she leans into her Barbie voice and starts being very cutesy and making cutesy faces. The music video for the song uses like puppets, kind of like Muppets, and it's very cutesy. And I also thought that was really interesting of how she was using girlishness and femininity to package this kind of like bomb of just destroying masculine egos. And I thought that would be a fun thing for me to do too. So I listened to that a lot, and I was like trying to kind of do the book version of that. And I think I succeeded.
I like that. Our sillier questions, all three of them were like really beautiful answers.
Amazing answers.
Yeah. So our last thing before we ask you for book recommendations is Instagram story time, where we pick a picture from your Instagram and then ask you for more information about it. So Karen picked this one, and
I did. I'm so excited to ask you
I'll
about
just
this.
let you run with it.
I'm so scared.
I think this was actually a TikTok originally, but I, as an elder millennial, consumed it as an Instagram reel. I love like tiny things. And you have a video where it's like calico critters reading a copy of Catalina and discussing. Please tell us everything about this.
Well, the calico critters, they were gifts from my partner. She played with like wooden toys and calico critters as a child. I had a different childhood. I played with Barbies, but she introduced me to calico critters, and I've had a lot of fun with them. Sometimes my editor ignores me, and in order to get him to pay attention to me, I sometimes tell him like increasingly maybe worrisome things for him. So one classic one that would get him to respond is, I'm going to contact Pete Davidson. Like, I'm going to invite Pete Davidson to my event. And he would be like, please don't. So I like knowing what would get his attention. And I use the calico critters to, I would use them I would do sort of like gruesome things to them. I read Valerie Solanas' Bag Manifesto, and then I put all of the calico critters in a bus, and then I had them like crash into the book, and then I like sent it to him along with like a picture of me on the floor. So I guess I largely use them a little bit to market Catalina, but I mostly use them to terrorize my editor into paying attention to me, because what else is his job? What, editing the writers?
I love how much of a practical joker you are. It's ridiculous. I want to see these photos.
I'll post them.
Amazing.
There was one where he was not paying attention to me, and I put the camera on, for video, and then I recorded myself throwing myself off the bed, and then falling, and then I stopped it, and I sent it to him, and he didn't respond to that one.
He still thinks you're on the floor to this day.
Yeah, we need to do a follow-up interview with this person now to give them.
Yes, please ask him. Please ask him whether when I asked him, I always like texting and asking him who's smarter, me or this person who I obviously think is smarter than me. I ask him a lot, who's smarter, me or Masha Gessen? And he usually ignores me. But if I say who's smarter, me or Masha Gessen, or who's a better writer, me or Toni Morrison, then you'll come out of hiding. And
he might be ignoring you on purpose because these things sound fun to receive, honestly. Like, I think you're making it worse for yourself by like giving him fun content.
He wants more content.
Yeah.
no, I think his phone is on airplane mode permanently because of
okay, well, as I mentioned before, we end every episode with asking for book recommendations. This can be an old book, a new book, anything you want. What should we be reading?
Oh my God. Let's see. What okay, this is a Primo Levi's The Drowned and the Saved is a book that I like a lot. I reread a lot. I'm a big rereader. I don't tend to read a lot of new books. My partner says, "Oh, I know things are bad when I see this book out." And it is basically a book that I read when I'm feeling especially plagued by survivor's guilt or by feeling like I have made it or I have reached a threshold of safety and people that I care about. My family is still undocumented. Many of my friends and loved ones are still undocumented. I'm obviously scared what's going to happen with the election. And then to have the whiplash of being a celebrated immigrant and, doing interviews and all of that, it's a little bit of a lonely place to be in. And so I read that book to feel less alone in feeling. I think a lot of us feel like we've been spared in some way, and our loved ones may have gotten the short end of the stick. So I like to read that, and it's very comforting for me.
I just read the description of this book, and I can't believe this is a book that you reread for comfort. I understand it based on what you just said, but for listeners, the description is The Drowned and the Saved is a book of essays by Italian Jewish author and Holocaust survivor Primo Levi on life and death in the Nazi extermination camps.
It is, but it also is. I think that a lot of reasons why people read me is, I think a lot of reasons why people read at all is just to feel less alone. I think being alive in whatever moment in time, in whatever bodily form your life takes in, is incredibly lonely and scary. And I do find that one of the most beautiful things about literature is where I can find comfort and companionship in people that I have like nothing in common with. People that I have like literally like nothing in common with. But then you see, there's a scene in the book that I think is an example of how something that could be so different in content sort of spoke to me, which is a scene in which a man that he met in a concentration camp shared his bread with him. And it was just this kind of stunning meditation on this moment of kindness. And I remember being, I guess, like maybe in my early 20s and suffering from some really horrible migraines. And the specialist gave me injections for those migraines, but they were rationed. I had I could only have a certain number of them a year or something. And I was experiencing like a debilitating migraine. And I had a friend of mine who we were close because our dogs were friends, but we weren't like especially close. And he dropped off he also suffered from migraines, and he dropped off one of his injections, not a controlled substance, but he dropped off one of his injections at my house and just texted me and said, "There's something downstairs." And he had taken an injection from his own like rationed medications for migraines. And because I had felt in my own body how awful that pain was, I was just like, oh my goodness, there's this moment of sacrifice and of seeing me, like looking into my eyes and saying, I know this pain, but I'll take this pain on so that you can be relieved of it. And I was just allowed to interpret that moment and to take that moment and have it mean so much to me and have it kind of replenish my belief in humankind, because I think I was able to place that moment in kind of a larger story of how humans can be towards each other. So I don't know. It's like it helps me kind of. I like books that help me remember that I'm just like one person in a moment, as part of a larger human story. Because sometimes our own feelings and our own pain can feel like it's the end all and be all of the world. But I like books that remind me that, I'm going to sound like a politician now, but remind me that we have so much more in common, and than we do, than our differences.
Karla, thank you so much. This has been an absolutely amazing half hour with you. I just can't tell you how much we appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun. These were really good questions.
Good luck with your panel today, or the session with Alia. I wish I could be a fly on the wall. You are both amazing, so it's gonna be beautiful.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to that interview, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. And in a few episodes, you'll get to hear from Karla again.
Well, Craig, as always, I would love to know what you've been reading and enjoying lately, if you would like to share that.
Yeah, the book is described as a twist on the haunted house story. So basically, there's this woman who lives with their child in London, but they're from, or somewhere in the UK, but they're from America. But they moved there to get away from kind of a rough home life. They say it was like growing up in a haunted house full of demons, basically. And they get this frantic call from one of her siblings, and are like, "You have to come home," but we don't really know why. And then when they get there, they find out their parents are missing. And there's a lot of things about racism in the South, and a really painful childhood and upbringing. And it's really haunting, I guess. I'm completely obsessed with it. I'm kind of flipping back and forth between the paper book and the audiobook. The audiobook is narrated by Gabby Beans, and she crushes it. It is so good.
I am so glad you recommended this. When you first mentioned it at work, I immediately got the audiobook, and I could not agree more about the narrator. This narrator is incredible. My mind is blown.
What are you reading right now?
Well, I just finished a book, and this is a backlist title. It's not new. It's from 2002, and it is called Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. I can't remember where I heard about this. It popped up on some list of favorite books that people recommended. So, of course, I gobbled it down. It is a historical crime novel. It's set in Victorian era Britain. And oh gosh, there's so much I could say about this, but I don't want to spoil anything. It's essentially about two young women who are leading very different lives in this time. And they kind of unwittingly get involved in a double cross fraud situation with some other criminals. And it's unputdownable. The characters are incredible. The twists and turns are incredible. The audiobook is also phenomenal. So I highly recommend it in that format if you would like to do so. This is one of those situations where I now want to read everything that Sarah Waters has written. So I'm going to be on the Sarah Waters train for probably the rest of 2024.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, if you would like to listen to either of those books, you can use the promo code SWITCH when signing up for a new membership with Libro.fm, and you will get 3 audiobooks for the price of 1.
Yes, and if you're enjoying the podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could give us a rating or a review and tell a friend.
And as always, thank you for listening.